men, and I use the term ever so loosely. Let's finish tearing this radial engine down and get it the hell out of the way. Cam cover's cracked. Jesus. The horrible crossover gear shift linkage. What a junk. What was Harley thinking? I know what they were thinking. What's cheap, easy, and fast? That's what they were thinking. Well, look how worn that bushing is too. The long and the short of it is to turn this into a right side shift. Take the trans out, take that shaft out, and put a regular right side shift, the gear shifter shaft in with a lever on it, and you're done. This is going in the garbage probably. See these front motor mount bolts come out real easy? If they don't come out easy, it means your frame is probably bent. I mean, if you got to pry on the mounts to get them in there and all that, you probably got a bent frame. So, despite all the problems with this thing, the frame isn't bent. That's not one of the problems. Actually, I take the blanking plate off because that's such a convenient place to grab the motor. And that's that. So then, to catch you up on what's going on, the empty 75 chassis is off the lift. The 75 motor is on the bench. The 76 bike is on the lift, and this is the one that would only do 50 miles an hour. So we're going to start checking the compression and try to figure out what's going on with it. Okay, inside on the lift, compression tester hooked up. Let's see what happens. Yeah, that's nothing. Okay, front cylinder, no good. As you probably noticed, my compression tester needle was bouncing all over the place. That's because the check valve that's supposed to lock the pressure into the gauge wasn't working right. I did get it fixed, and even after I got it fixed, the front cylinder would still only pump up to about 45. All right, let's see what the rear has got. Yeah, that's pretty good. Rear is good. All right, in order to do due diligence, I know compression on the front cylinder is no good. Before I jump to the conclusion that the juggler's got to come off and it's got a hole in a piston or something, we need to check the valve adjustment, because a valve that's hanging open could cause low compression. So I popped the clips out of the other side. I took the primary off so I could turn the engine over, because this one is electric only, no kick. I could jack the rear wheel up and put it in fourth gear and try to do it that way, but this is going to be easier for me. So let's rotate the engine around until the intake valve closes, move it up to TDC, and see whether the valves are out of adjustment or not. Intake valve is opening. Piston should be on its way down. Intake valve is closing. Piston should be on its way up. Let's get it at TDC and see where the valves are. Piston's top dead center. Okay, intake valve is tight as a drum. I can't rotate it at all. And so is the exhaust valve. Well, the exhaust valve I could rotate just barely. And the intake valve, not at all. So let's get these valves adjusted and see what happens to the compression. Okay, this is the down and dirty compression test. I did this off camera just a little while ago before I adjusted the valves. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for my thumb to get blown out of the hole. So when I did this before I adjusted the valves, I could not even feel any air moving. But now it's blowing my thumb off the hole. So let's put the tester in there and see what it says. Okay, after adjusting the valves, this is what I'm getting now. Higher, not as high as it should be, but a definite improvement. I think the fact that it's low now might be caused by the fact that the valves are being held a little bit off the seat, and the surface of the seat and the surface of the valve got burned a little bit. Running it may fix that, or taking the head off and lapping the valves in and facing the valves off might fix that too. But definitely a big improvement over what it was. I bet it'll go 70 now instead of just 50. In order to complete the diagnosis and kind of steer you or steer me in the direction we need to go to accomplish repair on this thing, I have hooked up here what's called a differential compression tester. I think some people call it a leak down tester. And you apply air pressure to it. You select a poundage, and I'm going to go for 80 pounds on that. And this dial tells you how much air pressure is being maintained in the cylinder. So if I put 80 in, a perfect engine would keep 80 in the cylinder. This one, with a regular compression tester on it, puts up 60 PSI, so it should be like 140, so that it's not as much as it should be. So something is leaking, and this is going to tell me what. So I'm going to zoom in on the gauges. The top dead center, front cylinder top dead center mark is in the window. So when I apply air pressure, theoretically, the piston should not move. You could stick a big breaker bar on the sprocket, but if you're a little over center one way or the other, you're not going to be able to hold it. And the breaker bar is going to swing around and probably break something like your wrist. So extreme caution when using this kind of a tester. Right now, the engine's in neutral. There's no bar on there. If the piston moves, it's not going to hurt anything. So let's dial up the pressure. Okay, I got 80 going in, 70 is being retained by the cylinder, which isn't actually too bad. And I can actually feel a little air blowing out of this hole, so that tells me some is leaking by the rings. When I go around to the other side, and I've done this already, when I go around to the other side, I could hear air blowing out the exhaust, and I could hear air blowing out of the car. So both valves are leaking and the rings are leaking. Not really too surprising. So anyway, I know both valves are leaking and the rings are leaking. Back the air pressure off. Once it's down to 0, the system is safe. For whatever reason, I couldn't get the rear cylinder to have a good seat at top dead center. So I used Plan B. And Plan B is to put a little bit of air pressure into the tester and then use my breaker bar and kind of feel around for top dead center. And you can see the breaker bar jerk one way or the other, and that's when the engine is going over top dead center. So the trick is to peak out the setting on the gauges, and theoretically that's going to have you at TDC, and then you can ramp up the air pressure to however high you want it to be, and run your testing then. And believe me, I am being extremely cautious doing this. If I have that air pressure cranked up too high, the engine will grab that breaker bar, rip it out of my hand, and whip it around if I let it get over center one way or the other. All right, I usually run this test at 80, but I don't want to have my hands on a breaker bar on the sprocket if I'm not exactly dead nuts top dead center, because the breaker bar will whip and probably break my wrist. So I'm going to run the test at 60. But you can see at 60 psi, we're retaining 58 psi in the cylinder. On the front cylinder, I could hear air coming out through the timing plug hole, which indicates air going through the rings. I could feel and hear just a little tiny bit of air, which is normal. I'm going to walk around the other side and listen to the exhaust pipe and the carb. Okay, I could hear just a little tiny bit of air coming through the exhaust and coming through the carb. So the valves are not perfectly seated. So they could probably use a little touch-up, which, considering this thing's probably been sitting around for, 30 years. I'm going to try to run this up to 80, which is usually the pressure I test at. And once again, I didn't have it exactly centered in the cylinder move. But anyway, you get the idea. So we got a little leak exhaust, little leak intake, a little leak rings. And that concludes this demonstration. Well, I pulled this engine down. I was originally thinking, it might be okay just to run this thing, and the valves will probably seat in and the compression will be okay. But anyway, decided to pull the heads off and touch up the valves. Got the heads off, looked down at the cylinders, and they were a little bit scored. Decided to pull the cylinders off. I mean, once you get the heads off, you're only 8 bolts away from having a top all the way off. And yeah, severely scored, melted, rings stuck. This would never have been okay, obviously. The owner's not happy about that. He was hoping to save some money. Never start one of these projects hoping to save some money. You ain't going to. Okay, here's the other one. The rear. Not as bad as the front. Ring's not stuck at least, but it was on its way to destruction. So, this engine's coming out. It's getting a whole rebuild. The rods are pretty loose. Let's look at a rod. Feels okay, but it's got a lot of back and forth. Rear isn't too bad. I'll see you next time something interesting crops up. Motor's coming out. And with that, I am out of here. Thanks ever so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Coffee cups and stickers, links down below. Bye.